Unaware his wife owns the very company his mistress's family worked for, Thomas Reed threw her out with her mother, believing he had upgraded his life by choosing wealth, power, and desire over loyalty. But what he didn't know was that the quiet woman he discarded was not only pregnant with triplets, she held a control powerful enough to crush every dream he built with the mistress he betrayed her for. Evelyn Grace Reed walked away that night without a fight, without tears, without exposing the truth she carried under her ribs and in her bloodline, leaving Thomas confident, careless, and blind to the empire she could destroy or save with a single signature. But why did she hide her ownership? Why did she let him throw her out? What was she silently planning for the man who replaced her with his mistress and the unborn triplets he never knew existed? And when the truth finally reached him, what she did shock him in a way no one imagined. The night tasted like betrayal, metallic and cold, as if the air itself rejected the moment Thomas Reed placed a suitcase at Evelyn's feet. Outside, the street lamps hummed through the quiet suburb, but inside, tension vibrated like a live wire. Evelyn stood still, elegant even in exhaustion, her eyes reflecting pain she refused to voice. Her mother, Margaret, hovered near her shoulder, aged, steady, but trembling slightly, like a page caught by wind. "Take it!" Thomas snapped, nudging the suitcase with his foot. His tone was final, loud enough for neighbors to hear, meant to humiliate as much as dismiss. "You and your mother need to leave tonight. I won't say it again." Margaret's heart clenched, a memory flashing of when another man, Evelyn's father, once closed a door on her the very same way. History had a violent habit of repeating when silence replaced truth. She looked at her daughter now, wondering if Evelyn could feel the circle closing. Evelyn's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Thomas, are you sure about this?" He scoffed, stepping back with a confidence he hadn't earned. "More sure than I've ever been. Lena's family believes in me. Finally, people who see potential instead of limitations. Unlike you." Evelyn's breath shook, but she swallowed it like poison she refused to spit back. Thomas didn't see her hand drift briefly over her abdomen. He didn't notice the faint glow in her eyes, the silent knowledge of the life she carried. Triplets, his heirs, his future. Every heartbeat inside her was a countdown to a truth that would burn everything he stood on. Thomas reached for his phone, smiling when Lena's name lit the screen in bold red. She was waiting for him at her family estate, legs crossed, wine poured, future painted in gold he had never owned. "Don't drag this out," he said coldly. "I've made my choice." Evelyn inhaled deeply, her voice calm but heavy with a truth unspoken. "So have I." It was not a threat, it was prophecy. She picked up the suitcase. Margaret wrapped an arm around her, weary but proud. Evelyn was no longer a woman pleading for love. She was a storm quietly preparing to arrive. As they stepped past the threshold into the waiting night, the door shut behind them like the seal of fate. Thomas didn't look back. Evelyn did. Just once. Her gaze lingered not in longing, but in memorization. The house, the man, the betrayal. Everything she walked away from would one day kneel at her feet. Evelyn and Margaret walked into the night with nothing but a suitcase and the weight of Thomas's final words, echoing like a sentence handed down without trial. The pavement was cool beneath Evelyn's feet, her steps slow, yet every stride carried something new. Resolve. She didn't cry, not because she lacked emotion, but because she was finally empty of the kind that begged to be loved. What remained in her was quieter, heavier, and far more dangerous. Margaret tightened her shawl, the cold settling deep into her bones. "Evie, we have nowhere to go tonight." Evelyn paused on the sidewalk, her breath steady, eyes rising to the house they once built together. "We have everywhere to go, Mama, just not backward anymore." A taxi slowed at her subtle hand raise. She didn't tremble. She didn't break. Only her fingers brushed her abdomen once more, softer this time, almost like apology to the 3 lives inside her. They deserved warmth. They deserved safety. They deserved better than the man who discarded them unknowingly. As the car pulled away, leaving Thomas's porch lights shrinking behind them, Evelyn pressed her forehead to the window. A memory flickered, years back when she and Thomas first moved into that same home. He carried her across the doorway laughing, promising forever, promising family, promising love. She believed him because she hadn't yet inherited the truth she carried through blood. Power terrifies weak men. She remembered the day her mother told her the truth. Evelyn was 25, quiet, calculating, numbers flowing through her mind like language. Margaret handed her a sealed envelope, the handwriting on it unmistakable, her biological father's signature, the same signature that signed away more wealth than Thomas could imagine. "You own what they built, Evelyn," Margaret whispered then. "But never use it to harm. Use it to protect." Evelyn promised. She meant it. But betrayal altered promises in ways love never could. The taxi pulled up to a modest apartment complex on the edge of the city, the kind Evelyn once donated anonymously to maintain. The irony did not escape her. The driver helped with the suitcase. Margaret thanked him with trembling sincerity. Evelyn stood silent for a moment beneath the flickering entrance light, her breath forming pale clouds that faded as quickly as trust once had. Inside the small room, Margaret sat on the single bed, shoulders sinking. "He chose her over you," she whispered, as if saying it aloud made it more real. Evelyn leaned against the wall, eyes heavy but alive with a brewing storm. "He didn't choose her, Mama," she said softly. "He chose the illusion of power. He just doesn't know who truly holds it yet." Margaret looked up, stunned by the calm in her daughter's voice. That calm wasn't surrender. It was foundation, foreshadowing in human form. "Evie, what will you do?" Evelyn's gaze drifted downward to her stomach again, not consciously, but instinctively. "I'll do what must be done, for them and for me." Her phone vibrated on the table, an email notification from the board, from her seat of control Thomas never understood. Evelyn didn't open it yet. The storm was only forming. Morning broke slowly, pale light slipping through cheap apartment curtains and landing on Evelyn's closed eyelids. She hadn't slept, not truly. Her mother's soft breathing filled the small space beside her, reminding Evelyn of every sacrifice this woman had made, raising her alone, surviving judgment, scraping through life silently while protecting a secret powerful enough to shift corporations. Margaret believed love could heal anything, but Evelyn now understood another truth. Love without respect becomes a weapon turned inward. She sat up carefully, hand instinctively supporting her lower abdomen again. She still hadn't told Margaret the full truth. The pregnancy was known. The number of children was not. That revelation sat inside her ribcage, like a heartbeat too big to contain, yet too precious to expose. She wanted to be sure before anyone else carried knowledge that could destroy or shield her future. Margaret stirred. "You didn't sleep." "No," Evelyn replied, gaze distant but sharp, "and neither did he." Thomas, she could picture him that morning, waking up in the same bed she once warmed, reaching for someone who wasn't her. But even if Lena lay beside him wrapped in new sheets and perfume, he would feel absence deeper than presence, because Evelyn was not gone. Her shadow lived in every contract, every decision, every inch of the empire Thomas thought belonged to someone else. The phone still sat unopened on the table, unread email notification glowing softly. Board access. Important. Evelyn reached for it reluctantly, not like a woman chasing power, but like one acknowledging responsibility she'd avoided too long. Her inheritance was her birthright. but grief over her estranged father had made controlling the company feel like betrayal of the boy she once loved in Thomas. Only now she saw clearly he never wanted partnership. He wanted dominance. She opened the email. Mrs. Evelyn Grace Reed, your authority as majority shareholder requires presence in an emergency board call today at noon. Certain financial concerns demand your directive. Confidential. Her breath hitched, subtle, controlled, but Margaret noticed. What's wrong, Evie? Evelyn turned slowly. Everything's beginning. Margaret blinked at her, confusion laced with fear. Evelyn did not elaborate because some storms needed silence to grow strong enough to break oceans. By 11:30, Evelyn had dressed, tailored blazer, hair pinned, no makeup, eyes sharp enough to cut marble. Margaret watched her in awe. She looked like her father without trying to, a different version, softer in heart, harder in spine. Evie, you look like someone the world should fear. Not fear, Evelyn corrected gently. Respect. She left Margaret sleeping, kissed her forehead lightly, then stepped out. Each footfall a drumbeat of destiny she once ran from. The apartment hallway smelled of old paint and forgotten ambitions, but Evelyn walked through it like it was a ballroom. Outside, an email pinged again. Unknown number. A message. Are you coming to the board meeting? If not, decisions will be made without you. Signed, Lena Hart. Evelyn's blood cooled. The mistress was already stepping into business matters she didn't understand. Evelyn typed only 3 words. I'll be there. Not loud, just inevitable. The boardroom stood tall like a cathedral of polished glass and power. High above the city Evelyn once viewed with naive awe. Now she walked into it with a steadiness built from betrayal, lineage, and the quiet rage of motherhood. The elevator chimed open and she stepped out, every click of her heels announcing a woman reborn. Executives turned, secretaries whispered. No one spoke her name, but recognition spread like current, not because they knew who she was, but because they felt what she carried. Authority in silence. Inside, 12 suited board members sat around the long marble table. Their eyes shifted sharply when she entered, as though a ghost had walked into a room built to exclude her. At the head sat Gregory Hart, Lena's father, face carved with arrogance and aging pride. Beside him, Lena herself crossed her legs slowly, a smile painted in pretentious confidence. Thomas wasn't there yet. That absence was a gift she didn't need but wouldn't waste. Lena leaned back, voice sweet like wine turned sour. Evelyn, we weren't sure you'd attend. Transitions can be emotionally overwhelming, especially after last night's events. Evelyn didn't blink. I'm here. That's what matters. A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. They sensed this wasn't a woman broken by eviction. This was someone standing on a truth too heavy to dismiss lightly. Gregory cleared his throat, fingers interlocked as if preparing for victory. We're restructuring. The company requires leadership with vision, someone who understands expansion. Thomas Reed is being groomed to take a senior director role under our guidance. The irony almost tasted sweet. And Evelyn, Gregory continued, your presence is appreciated, but the decisions... She interrupted, calm as dawn before a hurricane. You assume incorrectly. Lena raised a brow. About what, exactly? Evelyn slid a folder onto the marble. The sound was soft, but final. Ownership, Gregory chuckled, dismissive. You own nothing of significance, my dear. Your shares are minimal, sentimental. Evelyn's eyes didn't waver. Check again. A silence fell that could shatter glass. Gregory's face blanched as he scanned the documents. Her father's legal transfer, 34% controlling stake, board authority rights. Not legal fiction, not emotional. Power, carved legally, blood-signed, undeniable. Lena's smirk evaporated. This must be wrong. Thomas never mentioned he didn't know. Evelyn's voice flowed smooth, lethal. I kept it silent because I believed marriage was built on trust, not leverage. I wanted love, not control. Gregory's jaw tensed. You hid this for years? I did, she answered softly. I didn't want my husband to feel small in the shadow of what I inherited. A slow inhale. But then he chose a shadow over me. Lena swallowed, quietly, but Evelyn heard it like thunder. The boardroom doors opened. Thomas rushed in, breathless, adjusting his suit, smiling wide, until he saw Evelyn seated where power lived. Evie, what are you doing here? Her gaze met his across polished glass, across months of love, abandonment, and unborn heartbeats. Attending my company meeting, she replied. And in that instant, every prophecy the night whispered began to unfold. Thomas stood frozen in the doorway like the world had glitched around him. His eyes darted from Evelyn to the legal documents in Gregory Hart's shaking hands. Confusion twisted into disbelief, then into something uglier, panic. Evelyn didn't revel in it. She observed him the way one observes a fire they knew would burn the house down long before the first flame touched wood. He tried to laugh it off, strained and trembling. Evie, sweetheart, this must be some mix-up. You own shares. Since when? Why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked between arrogance and fear, like a man standing on a floor he suddenly realized was glass. Evelyn's eyes softened, but not with love, with clarity. Since before we married, she replied, I shared my life, my home, my loyalty, but I never thought wealth was something I needed to announce. You married a woman, Thomas, not a wallet. Lena's expression soured. She shifted in her seat, crossing her legs too sharply. You hid a fortune while letting him struggle to build his career? She challenged. Evelyn turned slightly, gaze like steel dipped in velvet. He never struggled alone. He rejected my help because he wanted to rise above me, not beside me. Thomas flinched. Gregory Hart slammed a palm on the table. This doesn't change anything. You may hold shares, but decisions require my approval, Evelyn finished calmly, tapping a clause in the contract. His breath caught. Board members leaned in, scanning papers again like men discovering land they thought belonged to others. Whispers swelled like tides after an earthquake. The weight in the room shifted, subtle at first, then absolute. Thomas approached slowly, tone softening into careful desperation. Evie, please, we don't have to turn this into conflict. We were married. We were, she corrected gently. Past tense. The silence that followed could bend steel. She stood from her chair, the gesture quiet yet earth-shaking. I didn't come to destroy what you built, Thomas. I came because you tore down what we were. Her voice trembled only once, when memory stabbed. Their first anniversary, his promise never to leave, his hands on hers saying forever. She blinked it away like rain sliding off glass. Gregory regained false courage. Even if you hold power, you won't use it. Women like you don't wreck empires. Evelyn lowered her hand to her abdomen again, unconsciously, a gesture invisible to most, but magnetic in meaning. Triplets, future, legacy, 3 heartbeats waiting for a world built safe for them. Not for pride or betrayal. She replied quietly, Then you don't know me. Thomas stepped closer, slow, hesitant, almost childlike. Evie, we can fix this. Come home. You don't belong in that tiny apartment. You need me. The boardroom felt like it exhaled. Evelyn's eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with awakening. No, Thomas, you need me. No one spoke. The room waited, as if destiny leaned in to hear what would come next. Evelyn smiled, small, controlled, terrifyingly kind. This meeting is adjourned. We reconvene when I decide. She walked out first this time, the power balance inverted. The storm had only begun. The hallway outside the boardroom felt quieter than any room Evelyn had ever walked through. Not empty, but suspended. Every step echoed like a declaration she never spoke aloud. Her heels tapped against marble with a rhythm nearly identical to her pulse. 3 smaller, hidden heartbeats echoed within her, steady and determined, unaware their mother had just shifted the fate of an empire. She reached the elevator and paused. Her reflection stared back, composed, elegant, unfamiliar. Once she saw a wife. Today she saw an heir. The elevator doors opened behind her instead of in front. Thomas had followed. "Evie, wait." His voice broke on the second syllable, like he hadn't expected her to walk away so easily. He caught up, breath shaky. "I didn't know. If I had, things would have been different." She looked at him fully this time, eyes still gentle but sharper than he remembered. "If you had known, Thomas, would you have loved me more, or just stayed for the money?" His jaw tightened, not from guilt, but from being seen too clearly. He reached for her hand. She didn't move away, but she didn't return the touch. His fingers hovered inches from hers, suspended in a space where love used to live. "You can't walk out on us," he said quietly. Evelyn blinked once. "You threw us out first." Thomas flinched. A truth spoken calmly hits harder than any scream. The elevator dinged. Open. She entered. Thomas followed instinctively, but something about her stillness made him stop at the threshold. A barrier invisible, emotional, unbreachable. She raised her chin slightly. "You should get back to Lena. She must be worried." He hesitated. Too long. Long enough for truth to wedge between them permanently. The doors closed. Evelyn exhaled deeply, not in relief, but transition. That elevator ride lasted only 14 floors, but inside it, she shed old love like skin. When the doors opened again, she stepped into her car, a company driver waiting as if destiny itself expected her arrival. Back at the apartment, Margaret sat by the window waiting with silent questions she didn't voice. Evelyn knelt beside her mother, resting her head gently on Margaret's lap. Margaret's fingers combed through her hair like she did when Evelyn was 5. After nightmares, after heartbreaks, after every harsh truth, the world wasn't gentle enough to soften. "You went," Margaret whispered. "I did." Margaret's voice trembled. "And now?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She stared at her palm, imagining 3 tiny hands curled there someday, trusting her, needing her, reflecting her strength. "Now I lead what's mine," she finally said, "not out of revenge, out of protection." Margaret touched Evelyn's cheek. "And Thomas?" Evelyn's voice was soft, almost merciful. "He will feel what he gave." Margaret didn't smile. She nodded, slow, knowing. Motherhood recognizes transformation before the child does. Later that night, Evelyn stood alone on the balcony, wind pushing through her hair. The city glimmered beneath her, unaware she would soon hold it in her fist. Unaware Thomas was already losing grip. Unaware revelations were coming. Unaware consequences had breath now. Unaware she carried 3 unanswered futures. The next storm would not knock. It would enter. 3 days passed. Slow for Thomas, fast for fate. He stood in his office, pacing, chest tight, mind like broken glass. Lena's perfume lingered on the leather chair, but for the first time it made him nauseous. He tried to work, to pretend he held control, but every contract he opened required a signature that wasn't his. Hers. Evelyn's name glared at him like a light he once ignored. He hadn't called her. Pride chained his fingers. Shame controlled his voice. But confusion strangled him like a collar, because Evelyn leaving wasn't the end. She had power, real power, and Thomas, for all his ambition, knew he had built dreams on borrowed ground. Lena strode in without knocking, phone in hand. "Thomas, my father wants updates. The investors are waiting. You need to talk to Evelyn, convince her to sign off the merger." Her voice wasn't gentle like before. Now it was sharpened by expectation. Thomas bristled. "I don't just ask her for signatures, she's my wife." Lena laughed, once cold. "Your ex-wife, technically. You threw her out, remember?" She walked to him slowly, hands sliding around his waist like ownership. "You told me she was done." Guilt flashed through him like lightning. For the first time, Thomas remembered Evelyn's silence as something other than weakness. A thing with teeth. He stared past Lena, vision blurring into memory. Evelyn standing in their kitchen last month, gently suggesting he review Hart financials again. He'd dismissed her then, said she worried too much. She wasn't worrying. She was warning. Lena's fingernails dug lightly into his shirt. Get her back under control before she ruins everything. Thomas swallowed. Evelyn is not someone to control. Lena's grip tightened. Then she becomes someone to eliminate. The room froze. Thomas's heart lurched. Protectiveness he thought dead surged up violently. He stepped back, jaw clenched hard. "Don't talk about her like that. You don't know who she is." Lena's smile thinned. "Neither do you." She turned away, heels striking the marble. "Fix it, or you become irrelevant." Thomas stood alone, breath trembling. The first crack in his loyalty to Lena formed, not from love for Evelyn, but from fear of what he never understood. He finally realized Evelyn didn't rise when she entered a room. Rooms bowed to her. Elsewhere, Evelyn sat on her apartment bed, hand resting over her belly, feeling a flutter. The first noticeable movement. She gasped softly, eyes closing as warmth bloomed through her. Triplets. 3 futures, 3 miracles, 3 reasons she could no longer afford silence. Margaret entered with tea, saw her daughter glowing in dim light, saw the change. They moved. Evelyn nodded, voice fragile and fierce. They did, 3 heartbeats stronger every day. Margaret sat beside her, tears softening into a smile. They will inherit strength, not pain. Evelyn looked at her mother, steady, wise, weathered. We won't hide anymore. Thomas must know. Not for him, for them. Margaret touched Evelyn's hand lightly. And when he learns who he abandoned, Evelyn's breath shivered through the room. He will understand what it means to lose everything he threw away. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky without rain. Foreshadowing cracked open like prophecy. Truth was no longer waiting. It was coming. Rain finally arrived that night. Soft at first, then insistent, as if the sky had been holding back as long as Evelyn had. She stood near the window with fingers lightly spread across cool glass, watching droplets race like decisions she could no longer postpone. Margaret slept in the next room, unaware Evelyn had been awake for hours drafting the message she never thought she would send. She opened her laptop. The screen glowed on her face like revelation. A single email. To Thomas. Subject, there's something you need to know, but she didn't type the truth. Not yet. Instead, she wrote, we need to talk, not as husband and wife, but as parents. Her hands hovered over the keyboard as if the words themselves breathed. She hit send, exhaled slowly, and felt her pulse steady, the kind of calm that precedes thunder, not peace. Across the city, Thomas read the email in bed beside Lena, who slept curled like possession rather than love. His chest tightened. Parents. The word didn't fit the narrative he believed. He read it again, again, again. Then he stood up, quietly, carefully, and left the room. He dialed Evelyn, but she didn't answer. She watched the phone ring from where it lay, silent on the table, letting his uncertainty grow. Curiosity is stronger than closure, and tonight Thomas needed curiosity to keep him awake. He called again. No answer. Instead, Evelyn replied with a text. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office, not our home, my office, ownership, authority, finality. Thomas stared at the message like it was a door he had locked from the wrong side. He barely slept, his mind looping through possibilities. Was she adopting? Pregnant? With whose child? The questions clawed at him, unraveling sleep until dawn crawled into his room like guilt. 10 a.m. arrived. Evelyn waited in the CEO suite, a room she had never sat in before, though she owned it for years. Sunlight laced gold across the polished desk where her father once sat, where she now sat, where Thomas would stand moments from now. Unaware he was walking into history he couldn't rewrite. He arrived breathless, eyes desperate but restrained. He closed the door behind him softly, almost reverently, like he feared disturbing something sacred. "Evelyn," he began, voice hoarse, "what did you mean by parents?" She didn't answer immediately. She watched him, studied him, not with affection but with understanding. He was a boy grasping for control of a world built by a woman he underestimated. She placed her palm on her abdomen. Thomas blinked, once, twice. His breath caught. "You're pregnant." Evelyn nodded, slow and deliberate. He stepped forward, tears threatening. "Evie, my God, why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was soft as silk over iron. "Because you never asked what I carried. You only asked what I lacked." Silence cracked between them like ceramic dropped from height. Thomas inhaled sharply, trembling. "How far along?" 4.5 months. His hand dropped from his chest. 4 months ago. Their last attempt at rebuilding, when apologies were still fragile, when hope flickered, when Lena hovered like temptation waiting for space. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "It's not one child." Thomas froze. Her gaze held him with unbreaking grace. "It's 3. The room tilted for him. His knees nearly buckled. 3 children, triplets, his heirs, his future, the legacy he threw out into the night like luggage. Thomas shook with realization. Late, slow, irreversible. Outside, lightning tore the sky open like truth. Inside, Evelyn watched him break and did not look away. Thomas staggered back, gripping the edge of the chair as if gravity suddenly hated him. Triplets, 3 hearts, 3 lives, 3 futures wrapped in a woman he had thrown into the night like an inconvenience. His voice came out shredded, almost childlike. "Evie, triplets, mine?" Evelyn's expression did not soften into forgiveness, just truth. "Yes, Thomas, ours, though you abandoned us before you ever knew us." The last word cracked him open like bone. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a man drowning in a room with air. "Evelyn, I didn't know. If you told me—" She cut him gently like mercy with boundaries. "If knowing was what made you stay, you should never have been my husband." He froze. That was not anger, it was clarity, and clarity hurts more than rage. He stared at her stomach, barely rounded yet monumental. 3 of them, he whispered, voice drenched in awe and shame. I should have been there." "You were," she replied softly, "just on the wrong side of the door." Thomas felt the memory stab like a blade. The night he threw her out, suitcase at her feet, mother trembling behind her. He remembered her hand brushing her abdomen. He'd missed it. A signal, a plea, a warning. He ignored her body speaking even when her words were gentle. Regret poured through him like floodwater through broken windows. He approached slowly, like a man nearing a ledge. "Let me make it right. Let me be part of their lives. Please, I'm begging you, Evie." She looked at him with eyes that once held oceans for him, but now those oceans had tides only she controlled. No child deserves a father who replaces love with convenience. Thomas swallowed, hard. the weight of consequence lodged in his throat. I never meant to replace you. You did more than replace me, she breathed. You discarded me and my mother, with no thought for our safety, our dignity, or what I carried. You chose desire over devotion, status over home. He closed his eyes. Guilt was oxygen now. Every inhale burned. Evelyn turned away, gazing out the window where the city moved unaware beneath her. These babies will know strength, not abandonment. They will inherit truth, not betrayal. I will raise them to stand without needing anyone who can't stand with them. Thomas's voice shattered. Evie, don't shut me out. She looked at him fully, unflinching, regal. You shut yourself out the moment you let another woman sit where a wife once slept. He deflated, shoulders collapsing, pride dissolving. I was lost. No, she said quietly. You were seen. Lena saw your hunger for status and she fed it. He trembled because it was true. Evelyn stepped past him, the distance final yet graceful. This isn't revenge, Thomas, this is consequence. He turned, eyes wet. What now? She paused at the doorway, poised like a queen leaving a throne room. Now, Evelyn whispered, you watch from the outside. And she left him there, standing in the office that belonged to her, surrounded by power he never earned, drowning in love he no longer deserved. Thomas remained in that office long after Evelyn's footsteps disappeared beyond the hallway. The silence was brutal, the kind that doesn't just fill space, it devours everything inside it. He stared at the chair she left, the same chair he once believed he deserved. Now it looked like something he could never touch again. He sank into it anyway, a man occupying power without authority. When he finally stood, the world outside the suite felt different. Voices lowered when he walked past, eyes tracking him like he was history rather than the future. No one congratulated him anymore. They watched him the way people watch buildings sway before collapse. He stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, phone buzzing, relentless. Lena again. He ignored it. For the first time, Lena's voice felt like a cage instead of validation. Instead, he dialed Evelyn, but stopped before pressing call. What would he say? Apologize? Too small. Beg? Too late. Claim love? Too dishonest. There was no sentence that could carry the weight of 3 unborn children and the wife he had abandoned. Outside, rain smeared across the city like memory streaking across glass. Thomas walked without direction. Past the street where he once picked Margaret up after a hospital visit. Past the cafe where Evelyn used to wait for him after work. Past the florist where she once bought herself daisies because he forgot their anniversary. Every memory returned like ghosts attached to light posts and sidewalks. But another memory returned too, a flashback vivid and sharp. 2 years ago, Thomas found Evelyn in his office late at night, reading financial documents he hadn't understood. She pointed out irregularities in hard accounts. Subtle, but intelligent. He brushed her away with a smile, kissed her forehead, and called her cute for trying. He didn't see her mind then. He sees it now. He arrived at the old apartment building, not because he planned to, but because remorse walked him there. The doorway was smaller than the home he cast her from, but it felt heavier, as if pain had soaked into the walls. He hesitated, hand hovering inches from the door. Inside, Evelyn sat curled on the couch, reviewing board reports, Margaret asleep beside her. She sensed him through the door, somehow like the way a mother senses danger or a lover senses truth too late. The knock was soft. Margaret stirred first. Evie, someone's here. Evelyn stood slowly, emotions wrapped in dangerous calm. She opened the door expecting business, or board matters, or war. She did not expect Thomas, drenched in rain, eyes glassed with regret, shoulders slumped like a fallen king. He inhaled, speaking like confession. I'm sorry, not for losing you, but for not seeing you. Evelyn didn't step back. She didn't soften, but her gaze lowered briefly to his trembling hands. The same hands that once held her with devotion before ambition replaced tenderness. She answered quietly, "Sorry is a seed. It means nothing until it grows." Thomas nodded, understanding the door before him was not wood. It was earned. He had none of the currency required to walk through it. He looked down, defeated. "Can I come in?" Her answer came slow, deliberate, weighted like judgment, yet not cruel. "Not today." She closed the door gently, not a slam, not revenge, just boundary. Thomas stood in the hallway, rain dripping from his hair to the floor. He didn't leave. He stayed until dawn, leaning against the wall like a repentant ghost. Inside, Evelyn lay awake, hand on her belly, feeling 3 heartbeats answering the world with life. Outside, Thomas wondered whether redemption had a doorway, and whether he still had the strength to knock again. Thomas hadn't moved when morning arrived. His clothes clung damp against his skin, and exhaustion hollowed his eyes, but he stayed, like a man guarding the remains of something sacred. Passers-by whispered, some recognizing him from business columns, none knowing the reason. He looked like winter left out in summer. Inside, Evelyn watched him through the curtains but didn't open the door. She moved through the apartment with silent grace, measured and slow, preparing tea for Margaret, reviewing emails, assessing contracts. The world demanded her authority, investors, directors, decisions, yet a man, once the center of her orbit, now sat like a forgotten page outside her door. Margaret shuffled out with sleepy eyes and concern stitched into her wrinkles. "He's still there, isn't he?" Evelyn nodded without looking up. "Do you pity him?" Margaret asked gently, the question not a trap, but a mirror. Evelyn's voice came soft, as though truth needed to be exhaled through silk. "I pity who he could have been. Because the Thomas she married was not the Thomas who threw her out. The boy she loved sought partnership. The man he became sought hierarchy. The difference was not in what he achieved, but who he believed deserved credit for it." Margaret placed a warm hand over her daughter's. "When your father and I separated, he expected tears to bring me back. Instead, I rebuilt myself, and he shattered." "So did you ever forgive him?" Evelyn asked, eyes shadowed with curiosity rather than bitterness. Margaret exhaled a memory through her voice. "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without letting pain hold the pen." The words settled in Evelyn like a seed beneath soil, not blooming yet, but anchored. Later, she dressed for the day, not in softness, but in control. A tailored navy suit, low bun, subtle lipstick, quiet dominance. Margaret watched, pride softening her voice. "You're becoming what your father wanted you to be." Evelyn turned slowly. "He wanted me powerful. You wanted me kind. I must be both now." The room stilled. Truth rarely arrives loudly. When Evelyn finally stepped outside, Thomas stood quickly, hope rising like sunlight through storm. Rain had dried on his clothes, but desperation still clung to him like humidity. He opened his mouth, apology, plea, something, but she lifted a hand, stopping him with calm authority. "Walk with me," she said. Shock flickered, followed by relief so sharp he nearly exhaled gratitude aloud. They walked side by side in silence, not as lovers, not as enemies, not even as parents yet, as witnesses of who they became. Cars passed, people brushed by. Life continued while theirs paused. 2 figures moving through a city, unaware destiny navigated their footsteps. Thomas finally spoke, voice raw. "I want to be there for them, for you, for redemption," Evelyn asked, not accusing, simply dissecting. He swallowed. For responsibility. She nodded once, a measured acceptance of progress, but not arrival. Then responsibility must be earned, not requested. They reached the corporate tower. Her building, her name in hidden ink written across every contract. Employees bowed subtly as she passed, not knowing they bowed to the owner. Thomas noticed, and realization carved deeper. Evelyn stopped at the entrance and turned to him fully. If you want to be a father, prove it, not with promises, but with presence, consistency, accountability. His breath trembled. She wasn't shutting him out. She was giving him a standard, and it was harder than forgiveness. Thomas nodded, voice breaking like dawn through darkness. Tell me how. Evelyn's eyes met his, steady, unshaken, sovereign. You start by standing, she said softly, even when it would be easier to leave. She entered the building. He remained outside and didn't move. Days passed, not quickly, slowly enough that Thomas felt every hour like a lesson and a punishment. He returned every morning to stand outside the building where Evelyn worked. He spoke to no one, demanded nothing. He simply stood, rain or sun, as if the pavement beneath him was penance and witness at once. Employees whispered, executives speculated, the press noticed once, but Thomas declined comment. He was learning something foreign to his pride, consistency. Inside, Evelyn watched, not through judgment, through observation. Each morning she stepped into the lobby flanked by confidence and silence, and he stood up straighter. She did not acknowledge him. She did not turn him away. She let effort speak, because love once rooted in blindness must now root in responsibility. Meanwhile, Lena spiraled. Her calls went unanswered. Her texts turned frantic. She appeared in Thomas's apartment furious, nails tapping glass like claws signaling possession rather than affection. You're humiliating yourself, she hissed, standing outside for her like a dog. She owns the company now, but she doesn't own your life. Thomas stared through her as though his past was finally losing shape. She's carrying my children. She owns more than my life. She owns what I failed to value. Lena's laughter cracked like thin ice. You think standing there will change her mind? She's punishing you. She wants you small. Thomas shook his head, slow and steady. No, she wants me accountable. Lena's face shifted, something cruel surfacing. If you walk away from me for her, Thomas, you'll regret it. He breathed deeply, unafraid. I already regret everything that led to this. She left with a slam. A door closing just as one inside him finally opened. Back at the office, Evelyn stood in a conference room leading negotiations with poise inherited from lineage and sharpened by heartbreak. Male board members faltered under her clarity. Investors leaned forward. Industry leaders listened. She commanded not through volume, through precision. Her phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. Doctor appointment at 2 p.m. today. We should check on the babies. Evelyn smiled softly, the kind of smile no boardroom ever saw. She ended the meeting, handed directives, walked out with elegance instead of rush. Thomas stood as she exited the elevator, eyes softening when he saw her. She paused, not long, just enough for acknowledgement. Doctor's appointment, she said calmly. Prenatal scan. You may come, if you want. Thomas nearly broke. The invitation was not reconciliation, but permission. A crack of possibility instead of a door. He nodded, voice low. I'll be there. She walked past him to the car. He followed to his own. They drove separately. Symbolism deliberate. 2 cars toward one future, but on parallel roads. At the clinic, Evelyn lay on the examination table, shirt lifted slightly, gel cool across her skin. Thomas sat beside her, nervous, reverent, unlike the man who once dismissed her concerns as noise. Then the monitor flickered. Three tiny shapes, three separate heartbeats. The room filled with rhythm, fast, alive, undeniable. Thomas's breath caught, eyes flooding. His hand hovered, wanting to touch her belly, but waiting for consent instead of assumption. Evelyn looked at him, unguarded for a moment. "This is reality," she whispered. He nodded, voice cracking around a truth that reshaped him. "I want to earn it." She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away. Sometimes evolution isn't heard, it's seen. News travels faster than regret. By the end of the week, whispers leaked through corporate corridors, coffee shops, and business forums. Evelyn Reed, majority shareholder. Thomas Reed, ousted husband. Company power shifting. No one knew about the triplets yet, but rumors swelled like thunderclouds waiting to break. That morning, Evelyn arrived at headquarters in a white suit. Sharp, serene, unshakable. Margaret accompanied her, elegant in modest attire, carrying years of endurance like invisible jewels. The elevator ride to the top floor felt ritualistic, like ascent rather than transportation. Employees greeted Evelyn with nods they never offered before, respect earned not through revelation but through presence. In the lobby below, Thomas stood again, not as a man seeking ownership, as a man seeking permission to grow. He carried a folder today, something he had prepared for days, analyzing financial loopholes Lena's family benefited from. He handed it to security with one request: "Give this to Mrs. Reed." No demands, no begging, just contribution, offered freely. When Evelyn received the file upstairs, she held it longer than necessary, not because she was moved, but because contribution felt unfamiliar coming from him. She opened it and read silently. Numbers, patterns, fraud trails masked under mergers, something only someone inside the heart circle could uncover. Thomas had chosen responsibility over romance. Later, during a strategic meeting, her voice cut through the room with clarity. "We suspend heart privileges pending investigation, effective today." Executives blinked, stunned, but no one contested. Authority didn't need volume when rooted in truth. Outside the glass room, Lena stormed in with fury, scorching her expression. She marched toward Evelyn like someone who believed proximity equaled power. "You're doing this out of spite," Lena spat. "You're punishing Thomas. You're punishing us." Evelyn stood, calm, measured. "Consequences are not punishment. They are proof." Lena scoffed. "Of what?" "That actions have weight." Lena's eyes flashed. "You think power will bring him back to you?" Evelyn blinked slowly. "I don't need him back. I need stability for my children." The word hit like a slap. "Children?" Lena repeated, tone sharp and fearful. "You're pregnant?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "With triplets." Silence detonated through the room. Heavy, undeniable. Board members exchanged shocked glances. Lena stumbled back, pride cracking through, her facade like ice breaking under weight. Triplets meant heirship, legacy, continuation, and Lena would never compete with 3 lives born of vows she helped destroy. "You ruined him," Lena whispered. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes steady, unbreakable. "He ruined himself when he chose image over integrity." Security escorted Lena out as her composure shattered into anger she could no longer weaponize. Evelyn didn't look back. She returned to the conference table and spoke as if thunder never passed. "We restructure the board within the week. Prepare all documents." Her authority filled the space like oxygen, and yet, beneath her power, beneath her decisions, a flicker of emotion lingered. Not nostalgia, not love, possibility, because downstairs Thomas continued to stand, quiet, consistent, changing, not enough yet, but no longer the man who threw her away. Change rarely begins with forgiveness. It begins with effort witnessed. And Evelyn was watching. The story broke before dawn. Business empire shaken, hidden heir takes control. CEO role transfers to Evelyn Grace. Riyadh Hart family under investigation. The headline spread like wildfire across newspapers, television banners, financial bulletins, social feeds. Stock markets jolted, investors scrambled, reporters camped outside the company building. The world wanted to see the woman who stepped from silence into throne. Evelyn arrived that morning, not hidden or escorted. She walked through the front entrance. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones surged forward with hungry questions. Mrs. Reed, did you always own majority shares? Why expose your ownership now? Is it true Thomas Reed is now powerless? What's your response to Hart corruption claims? Evelyn paused at the steps, poised, composed. She didn't yell over the noise. She raised a hand. Silence fell like obedience. I didn't take power, she said calmly into a wall of cameras. I accepted responsibility. The press stilled. Even traffic seemed to stop breathing. For years, I believed loyalty meant silence. I was wrong. True loyalty protects. It does not hide. I stand here for the company, for its employees, for integrity, and for the future we are building. Not once did she mention Thomas, but the world heard his absence louder than words. Inside the building, executives stood as she entered the atrium. Not because they were obligated, because leadership commands respect it does not request. Margaret watched from a distance, eyes glossy with pride no empire could buy. But the storm outside Evelyn's control approached next. Reporters spotted Thomas arriving minutes later. Cameras turned, voices sharpened. Thomas, did you know your wife controlled the company? Do you regret leaving her? Are you seeking reconciliation or relevance? He swallowed. No lies left to stand on. Evelyn never sought power. She was power. I'm learning that now. That answer shocked reporters into silence. He wasn't fighting her rise. He was bowing to its truth, but questions cut deeper. Are you involved in the Hart scandal? Did Lena influence your decisions? Were you unfaithful? Thomas exhaled, fragile but honest. I let ambition blind me. My mistakes are mine alone. The cameras loved blood, but they respected confession. Inside, Evelyn watched the broadcast on her office screen. She expected deflection, denial. But Thomas stood against the storm he once created, not to win her back, but to take responsibility. Her chest tightened, not forgiveness, but recognition of growth. Later, when she stepped into the lobby, Thomas stood waiting, not with flowers, not with grand gestures, simply present, hands unclenched, pride surrendered. You handled the press with dignity, she said quietly. You handled the world, he replied, hard in his voice but not in demand. For a moment they stood before each other, not as broken lovers or fractured history, but as two parents with futures tied to three tiny heartbeats, still unseen by the world. Thomas spoke carefully. I don't ask to return to you. I ask to stand beside our children. If you allow it, I will earn my place, not with words. Evelyn held his gaze, steady, unreadable. Tomorrow came too quickly, because tomorrow was the shareholders' summit, public, global, defining, and tomorrow would decide not only who controlled the company, but who would be worthy of standing beside her legacy. The shareholders' summit filled the grand hall like Judgment Day. Chandeliers burned gold above hundreds of suits and cameras, the air electric with expectation. Evelyn entered through the center aisle, not escorted, not introduced. She arrived like inevitability. Margaret sat in the front row, quiet, dignified, the root beneath the tree. Thomas stood farther back, not beside Evelyn, but present, no longer entitled, but attentive. He watched her, not with possession, with reverence. He had finally learned the difference. The chairman approached the podium, voice trembling beneath the weight of unfolding history. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to finalize leadership restructuring and address the heart irregularities identified under Mrs. Evelyn Reed's direction. Applause rose, thunderous, unanimous. Evelyn took the stage. Lights bathed her in a glow. No betrayal could dim. She stood tall, one hand resting unconsciously over her abdomen. The audience unaware they were witnessing not one legacy but three. She addressed the room with calm authority. This company stands today not because of dominance, but because of integrity. We rise when we protect those who trust us, and fall when we let greed guide us. She paused, a silence firm enough to stand on. I accept the role of CEO. She didn't ask, she declared. Then she turned to the screen behind her. Stock charts, audit proofs, corruption trails. Lena's family stood exposed in numbers sharper than any sword. Gasps rippled like shockwaves. Security escorted the hearts out. Powerless before the woman they underestimated, Lena avoided Thomas's eyes, shame crumbling her poise. He didn't look away. He accepted consequence not as cruelty but truth. When the room settled, Evelyn continued, voice shifting from business to something deeper. And now, a personal announcement. The hall leaned forward. For those unaware, my removal from my home was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of three others. Whispers ignited like flame. Evelyn lifted her chin. I am pregnant. Shock exploded across the hall. Flashes blinded, whispers swarmed, but she raised her hand again, and silence obeyed. Not with one child, but with triplets, heirs to this legacy. They will inherit a company built on authenticity, not ambition. Margaret's tears fell silently. Pride shone like sunrise. Thomas stood frozen, awestruck, chest shaking, but Evelyn wasn't finished. She looked directly at him, not with pain, not with bitterness, but with final truth. And as for their father, he will not inherit this throne. Gasps cracked like gunfire. Thomas closed his eyes, accepting the blow with bowed head. He deserved it, but then Evelyn spoke again. Soft, devastating, merciful. However, he will have a chance to earn a place in their lives. Thomas's head lifted, hope and humility colliding like rain and light. Not guaranteed, not entitled, possible. And that possibility was the shock, the twist, the mercy he never saw coming. The room erupted in applause, not for Thomas, not against him, but for Evelyn, the woman who rose without destroying, who led without crushing, who protected more than she punished. After the summit, Thomas approached her slowly, as if nearing a horizon he never expected to reach. He whispered, raw, trembling, true, "Thank you for giving me a chance." She looked at him, eyes bright, voice soft as prophecy. "Don't thank me, earn it." Thomas nodded. No promises, just resolve. Because this empire was no longer built on his ambition. It was built on her strength, her motherhood, her legacy, her name. Evelyn Grace Reed walked forward, the world opening before her. Thomas walked behind, not entitled but determined, and somewhere inside her 3 heartbeats kicked, as if recognizing the world they would soon inherit.